My name is Nick Huber. I'm a freelance business journalist, and in this webinar we're going to be interviewing leading thinkers on corporate culture and technology and asking them what they think the big trends are in work and tech now, and how companies can create a winning culture when an increasing amount of their workers aren't working face-to-face in the office. Our first discussion topic is all about what constitutes a good corporate culture. Quite a big question, but David of Innocent Drinks, I know that corporate culture is very important for your company. Do you want to start off?
So many things make up a strong corporate culture, but if I was to pick out one thing, it would be your purpose and your values. So not just what you're here to do, but how you're going to do it. So if you want to think about Innocent Drinks, we set out our purpose is to make natural and healthy, delicious drinks that help people live well and die old.
Thank you very much for that, David. Also, would you like to sort of answer or try to define what you think makes a good corporate culture?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I think for us, I would agree, values are very important for a good company culture. I would also say for us, especially transparency and trust. When you find that you have a workplace where there is a lot of transparency or like that sort of builds trust, and that's really important for a good culture. I think that means team members feel comfortable sharing and contributing to the culture. They feel comfortable challenging process and thinking, and so those are very important aspects of culture, as well as I think I guess when you have values, like good company culture also comes from having team members that are sort of aligned with the values as well. So those are a few things.
Okay, thank you. Rosie, from an architect's perspective, how would you define a good corporate culture? Presumably a lot will partly depend on the design of a building.
Well, I think before we even get to design, I think the corporate culture or the culture of business is inherent in the people. I think before you even think about space of course can reinforce that, but you know, in the essence, you're looking at what makes the company work and the people within it work. And I think at Spacelab, you know, we are really culturally driven. Our culture is really important to us, and I think the key driver of that, you know, as the others have said, is values and purpose. And really, our key sort of value is freedom, and that brings in all the issues of sort of trust and autonomy. So freedom, obviously, coming with that responsibility, but how can we create a culture where people are as free to do whatever it is they need to do to be their best? And we've found that our culture really, really thrives on that. Of course, underpinned by support and also jollied along with quite a lot of fun.
Remote working is changing all sorts of businesses of all sizes and all sorts of industries. But how is it changing the actual business culture?
We're now 21 years old, Innocent Drinks, and we've got people that started 15, 20 years ago and started when they were in the low 20s. Then now our demographic has changed entirely because they've stuck with us. Where they once had their needs and wants revolved around a lot of social interactions, having beers on a Friday night with colleagues. Actually, now they live further outside of London. They've got longer commutes. They've got kids, flexible working has really allowed us to attract and retain that great talent, and keep a diverse and engaged workforce.
Also, your startup is fairly unusual in that you don't have a head office. Everyone works remotely. How does that work?
Yeah, no, so we are about 90 people spread across the entire world. So it's definitely quite unique because there's a lot of different time zones to cover there. So yeah, I mean, it's what we're used to. So the entire company structure is set up based on the fact that we're all remote. It means that we are able to have a bigger hiring pool. You know, we are able to hire from across the world. It means that we can be more diverse. We can focus a lot on inclusivity. It's you know, life changing for a lot of people that we can include workers with disabilities or chronic illnesses, parents, expecting parents, and anyone that really has troubles to get to an office. So that's huge for us as well.
Would your company be able to have the breadth of skills and experience and the type of workforce it has if you just were a more traditional company with a head office in, say, I don't know, San Francisco or wherever?
Yeah, it's interesting because I guess it probably started a little bit when we were very, very like, you know, back in 2012 when we were in San Francisco, and, you know, like the market there is so saturated. So it was hard to hire in San Francisco back then. So yeah, I don't think we would have at all the same sort of breadth of, like, wide range of people. Really, it's quite remarkable, like how it opens up when you know, we have people in Brunei, Sri Lanka, South Africa, Mexico. It's pretty special.
One of the challenges for companies as more people work remotely is maintaining that kind of team spirit and strong corporate culture when people aren't meeting face to face. Also, how do you sort of strike that balance? How do you keep a strong corporate culture and team spirit?
I mean, there's so much that we do, so I would keep you here for a while if I went through all of the things. But yeah, to begin with, I guess it's you know, as I said earlier, to set up the sort of company structure to really you know, for remote work is really important, so that it's you know, it's so different depending if you're like fully remote or if you're like flexible working. But we, for example, you know, there shouldn't be any benefits of being in a specific location really for us, and I think that really helps. Like, everything should be able to get done asynchronous. But in terms of, like, I guess, like team spirit and stuff, like we do so many like things like over Zoom calls, in Slack. We have a water cooler in Slack, which essentially is like, yeah, you grab your water, you can kind of hang out and chat to whoever is online at that time. You know, we do town halls over Zoom. So everything's obviously done over Zoom because that's the only way we can meet.
So what would the town hall involve?
So so we do town hall and many other sort of company-wide meetings on Zoom. Town hall is where everyone in the company is able to sort of ask questions to the CEO and the leadership team. So that's one of the things that we do. And it is probably worth mentioning that we do have like a yearly company-wide retreat, and that we do really also see the benefits of like connecting like in real life if you are able to. So that sort of builds and helps when you are then in a remote setup, that you actually have met someone in person.
David, at Innocence, how do you, when more people are working remotely, how do you kind of cement those company values and the team spirit?
At business level, your internal comms capability becomes incredibly important, so you know, how do you cascade your company comms? How do you keep people engaged? You know, the other day we had our quarterly meeting, and our CEO did it from a over video conference via from a small closet, but then at a sort of social level as well. Keeping those ties going. You know, Innocent won't be the only company that does this, but you know, we've seen, you know, you see people having quizzes over Microsoft Teams or Zoom, people having beers on a Friday over video conferencing, where if we were in the office we would be having them together face to face. I think that some of the best examples I've seen in actually recent days were we had 100 people in a chat room yesterday singing happy birthday to someone completely out of sync, but that's good fun. But we also had someone who likes to do a DJ set at our company parties, and with everyone working remotely recently, he decided he still wanted to do that, so he set up a live YouTube link and did a live DJ set for everyone. And it was really interesting, not only just to see that fun part, but actually the interaction on the comments of people who across the company wouldn't usually talk to each other, but you get this interaction of people just having fun, and so people do get really creative, and it's quite interesting.
How is the workplace design affecting remote working? Presumably a lot of your offices now have more space for remote workers or for shared co-working spaces.
So workplace design is responding in the sense of trying to diversify away from kind of a very traditional office with just pure desking, to give people the choice. I mean, lots of people talk about activity-based working, so creating a space that's set up for a more activity-based working style is a space that will provide different types of work point tailored to the activities that people need to do. So that's kind of more functional in terms of how workplaces are really adapting. There's of course a kind of a look and feel part of this, but interior design trends will come and go, and that will be influenced by various things. So seasonally, colours, materials, finishes will change year on year. But I think it's more this underlying trend for workplaces to be more diverse. Also learning from some of the spaces that people are using outside of the office to work remotely. So the kind of, the domestic elements that people enjoy about working from home, and how are those starting to come in, sort of softer areas within workspaces, if people sort of find them more comfortable to do various tasks in. Also the kind of hospitality business lounge type influences are coming in. So some of that is also from co-working spaces. And it's definitely diversifying the workspace. The thing I would also say here is that culture has to go hand in hand with these trends, because it's not about jumping on a bandwagon and kind of jumping on the co-working space bandwagon of getting a beer tap, if actually that really doesn't work for the culture of the organisation, either the brand but also really the culture in terms of, is the culture ready for people to just go and grab a beer? It's not just about, oh, we really want a beer tap, but if the culture's not in place to enable people to actually go and use that, then don't design that into the space. So I think workplace design is certainly responding, but it's needing to be sensitive to the culture. I think the biggest question about the real recent trend to much more home working and the experience of everybody working at home, I think the question there lies, what is it that a workspace should provide and really needs to provide that remote working can't provide or can't provide as well? And I think that's it's intellectually fascinating, but it's also a really big challenge for us to think what are the workplaces in the future going to need to be and going to need to provide to really nurture our culture.
Thank you, Rosie. Are companies struggling with some aspects of remote work and digital technologies? Phil Lander of Samsung.
I think all customers that are moving in this direction are facing a number of challenges. Probably the first challenge from a technology perspective is around choice. There is so much choice available today, or so many directions a company could go, and we often talk of it in the terms of digital Darwinism. There's cloud, there's big data, there's AI, there's 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi 6. So many choices to be made that could influence how you set up your employees for remote working. And then the second challenge is around how do you meet the different user group needs? How do you serve your colleagues who work in sales, your colleagues that work in customer-facing customer service organisations or colleagues that are processing and doing analysis type work have a different set of needs. And I think companies, it's taking a longer time for them to realise that actually there isn't a one-size-fits-all here, and therefore that does make your choice perhaps a little more complicated. But in making that choice, actually you can serve your employees better. And then finally, I think, you know, the most pressing point that we see from our customers is around security and protecting corporate information and corporate assets and corporate data. And this, you know, may not be the most exciting topic in the world, but increasingly we see this coming to the top of the discussions, and looking to do so in a way that it doesn't impact the user experience. This is vitally important. If the security and the usability is impacted through security, then unfortunately the situation is that colleagues will find new ways around it and choose to use their own messaging applications or their own video conferencing applications. And then, you know, in a sense, the organisation has lost the control they believe they had in terms of the control that allows them to protect that data. So organisations that are being very successful are actually spending a lot of time looking at usability and the user needs, and then looking at the technology that can serve that, and then underpinning it with a strong security capability that gives them the confidence to protect their business and protect their users, and also ensure that privacy is in place in this world of work-life blending, where you might be doing some personal activity in your work time, as I talked about earlier, and in doing that, that information is not the domain of the corporate space. So lots of challenges, but lots of opportunity for customers that we're working with.
Okay, David, at Innocent, what kind of technologies do you use for teamwork, whether you're working remotely or in the office?
We are using a variety of different platforms to communicate. I guess we've also got our internal intranet, which we have always used, and is really useful also when you're in multiple different geographies as well, across Europe. And I guess one thing I would add actually is just not on the communication front, but actually on just where you store all of your stuff. And so historically, we've always had, you know, internal servers that we store all our documents on. It's only in the last sort of few years where we've moved over to Dropbox, or we're kind of in this weird moment where half the company's using Dropbox, half the company feels more comfortable using the old way of working. But actually, you know, being able to access files on my phone or my tablet is brilliant when I'm out and about, and Dropbox enables that.
Rosie, as architects, how do you sort of work in a team and share designs and that kind of thing?
Yeah, so actually at Spacelab, our work's always been really, really collaborative, and our design teams are always made up of, and just that they are a team. So whilst we've always been very tech enabled, I think remote working does pose new challenges. But we've found collaborating things like the Google Suite, so Google Drive, Google Sheets, Google Docs, Google Slides, everyone's able to work in real time together, and it's actually quite nice to sort of see your colleagues, you know, their initials in the top corner, and everyone's working on presentations literally in real time together, and that's fantastic. Slack, we've been using Slack for a couple of years now, and I think as some of the others have said, that's totally transformed the way we communicate very clearly, quickly, in real time, etc. But also having channels and threads for just collation and being a repository of documents as well as whole conversations. And within that as well, there's kind of a real cultural element that, you know, not all of the threads are project related and work related. There's a lot of socializing that goes on through Slack. And as some people have mentioned, sort of the water cooler thread, for example, but, you know, various chats and various communities happening through Slack. I think lots of calls when we do them remotely. Likewise, we tend towards video calls, we tend to use Zoom, and I think it's really important to be able to recreate as much as possible the kind of face-to-face interaction with your colleagues by having a video call.
Given the inexorable rise of remote working, what is the future of the physical workplace, the office?
Yeah, and I think this is a really interesting question in the current context of the huge rise in remote working and the option for remote working. And I think given that the physical workspace still plays and will play a really, really key role, and in some senses even an even more key role in what it is that we do, because actually, whilst technology and culture is enabling us to work in whole new ways, there needs to be something in a physical workspace that still brings us back together. So I think as we change all of those things around us in terms of remote working, the physical workspace becomes, the very physical expression of a company's culture, of a company's values, and it becomes the place that people can come together. So I think whilst the workplace of the future may shrink in size, it may offer much less physically in terms of what it currently does, but I think the things that it offers, it needs to offer really, really well, and it needs to be a reason for people to come to it.
Phil, what do you think about that? Do you think that there's still going to be plenty of company offices, corporate offices in 10, 20, 30 years' time, or are we all going to be working remotely or co-working spaces?
So I definitely think remote working is growing and will continue to grow. And just as an expectation of individuals coming into the workplace, the ability to, whether you're a primary carer for children or other people, or actually it's just an expectation of how you want to manage your life, you'll be looking for those requirements when you choose a company and choose a role. I also think, looking at the economy and the growth of the gig economy, more organisations will be looking to expand resource at certain points in time and reduce resource at certain point in time. Call centres, for instance, where actually out-of-hour service or overflow call centres will probably be manned by people working from home, set up with technology to allow them to log in and access the appropriate systems to serve those customers. That said, I think there will still remain for many organisations a hub and a heart of the organisation and a physical location, and therefore, providing that ability to bring people together as you need to within the sort of remits of your culture, and also, potentially to represent that figurehead organisation. You raise a very good point about co-working shared office spaces. I mean, a huge rise and particularly in metropolitans across Europe and the world. I think they will also continue to grow as well, and hopefully they do continue to grow, because it's the startups that are using those and bringing new innovation into the business world. But remote working is definitely here to stay and will grow. But I personally think in that 20 to 30 year time horizon you mentioned, that actually there will still be plenty of physical corporate or office space headquarters where they'll be used for that heart and that hub of the business.
Also, one of the potential downsides of remote working is the social isolation, and in particular the adverse impact on mental health. Your company in Buffer, how do you cope with that as a team?
We use a tool that you can sort of receive, coaching and that through an app as well. So it's definitely a huge focus of ours. We do a lot of social sort of events, as I said earlier, like over Zoom. Like there's fancy dress days, there's Halloween, there's after work hangouts if you want it. There is casual chats during the day. A lot of I think Rosie touched on it earlier, there's a lot of sub sort of channels within Slack, whether it's plants and gardens or baking or cute pets. It could keep you busy all day going through those. So yeah, there's a lot of those things that we do. We use mindfulness coach that does session in my team. So that's something that we do as well. So yeah, there's a lot of things. I think the others touched on as well earlier. Obviously, having video chats, being around for each other, having a manager that regularly chats to you, mastermind buddies, that kind of thing, and how important, for us, it's really important to have that human connection. So video chats, body language, you might see that I do move my arms a lot, and facial expressions all of that is so important, especially if you are like fully remote, is that, you really, show, more than perhaps just your face. It's really important that piece, like that body language, and also think through that. We are very intentional about how we write as well, the tone in emails and that kind of thing, to sort of really make sure that the other person really sees you. So yeah, those are a few things that we do.
Okay, thank you very much, Ulsa. And thank you everyone for the discussion. Obviously, I think we could carry on for hours and hours talking about these issues, but I think we agree that remote working, the growth in remote working, is here to stay for the foreseeable future. We're perhaps in the first generation of remote working, and companies are still working out the best ways to and the best types of technology to collaborate. But things like Thread, Slack, Zoom are becoming mainstays of corporate communication. The impact on team spirit, that's another challenge, but we heard that companies such as Buffer are finding ways for sort of create a kind of virtual connection and maintain team spirit despite people rarely meeting face to face. Again, thank you all very much, and hopefully that was useful for you watching.